एवरीवन, वेलकम टू माय यूट्यूब चैनल द सोलफुल डायरी। आज के वीडियो में हम बात करेंगे सादत हसन मंटो के वर्क ठंडा गोश्त के बारे में। इससे पहले हम ऑथर के बारे में डिस्कस कर चुके हैं, जिसका वीडियो का लिंक डिस्क्रिप्शन में है। चलिए शुरू करते हैं आज की वीडियो। चलिए अब स्टोरी को डिस्कस कर लेते हैं। ठंडा गोश्त इज अ कंट्रोवर्शियल एंड पावरफुल शॉर्ट स्टोरी by renowned Urdu writer Sadat Hassan Manto, first published in 1950, set during the devastating partition of India in 1947. The story explores themes of communal violence, sexual assault, and the psychological decay caused by unchecked brutality. The frank treatment of these subjects led to an obscenity trial against Manto following its publication. The story begins with a tense scene in a hotel room where Ishar Singh and his lover Kulwant Kaur are having a heated argument. Kulwant is furious because Ishar has returned after a long unexplained absence and is now cold and distant. She accuses him of infidelity. During a sexual encounter, Ishar is unable to perform, which strengthens Kulwant's suspicion that he has been with another woman. Enraged by his sexual indifference, Kulwant stabs Ishar with his own kirpan, which is a Sikh ritual dagger. As he lies dying, Ishar finally confesses the truth. He has not been with another woman. Instead, he participated in the recent riots where he and his associates abducted a young woman from a Muslim family. When he tried to rape the girl, he discovered that she was already dead and her body was cold flesh. This traumatic and horrific encounter and the violation of an already lifeless body has rendered him impotent and hollow. The revelation causes a greater shock to Kulwant than the act of stabbing him. Ishar's dying confession reveals the moral decay and trauma that resulted from the partition violence. The main characters of the story are Ishar Singh, a Sikh man who commits a violent act during the 1947 partition, and his mistress Kulwant Kaur. The story also features an unnamed Muslim girl who is the victim of a horrific act and becomes a significant, albeit deceased, presence in the narrative. Ishar Singh, a Sikh man who in a moment of emotional and physical disconnect is unable to engage in intimacy with his mistress. His inability to perform is linked to the horrific violence he committed during the riots, where he killed a Muslim family and attempted to rape a Muslim girl before realizing she was already dead. Kulwant Kaur, Ishar Singh's mistress. She is suspicious of Ishar's sudden coldness and in a fit of jealousy ultimately stabs him with his own dagger. She becomes the focal point for the story's climax as Ishar reveals his terrible secret to her. The unnamed Muslim girl. The victim of Ishar Singh's violence during the riots, the story reveals that Ishar committed his violent act against her only to discover she was already dead. The memory of her corpse, which Ishar refers to as Thanda Gosht or cold meat, becomes the source of his importance and the story's central themes. The main themes of Sadat Hassan Manto's Thanda Gosht are the brutal consequences of communal violence, particularly during the 1947 partition, the dehumanization of victims, the exploration of the moral ambiguity of human behavior, and the way sexual violence intersects with sectarian conflict. The story uses the phrase cold flesh to symbolize the cold and feeling violence of the riots and the resulting death and violation of a young woman. Uh, Communal violence and the partition of India. The story is set against the backdrop of 1947 partition and its violence. It depicts how the geographical divisions and political conflicts have a profound and brutal impact on the lives of ordinary people. Dehumanization of victims. The title Thanda Gosht refers to the cold flesh of a dead, violated Muslim girl. The story shows how violence can strip away a person's humanity, reducing them to nothing more than a physical object or a cold piece of meat. Moral ambiguity and psychological complexity. Manto explores the moral ambiguities of his characters, revealing how circumstances and internal conflicts can lead to horrific acts. The story delves into the psychological state of the perpetrators, showing their internal struggles and the moral compromises they make. Sexual violence and its intersection with political conflict, the story highlights how sexual violence, especially rape, was a tool of war during the partition. It shows how the violation of women's body was an integral part of the larger violence and conflict between different religious and political groups, humanity and the aftermath of violence. The story is a stark portrayal of the human cost of violence and conflict. It examines the psychological and emotional toll on victims, perpetrators, and the society as a whole, highlighting how violence can leave lasting scars on the human psyche. Motives. Sadat Hassan Manto's Thanda Gosht uses powerful and disturbing motives to critique the profound moral and psychological decay caused by the 1947 partition of India. The story's central motives revolve around violence, sexuality, and dehumanization of both victim and perpetrator. The motive of cold flesh. The central motive of the cold flesh acts on several symbolic levels throughout the story. The desecrated female body. The cold meat is literally the body of the dead Muslim girl that Ishar Singh discovers while attempting to rape her. It is a brutal symbol of the communal violence and the violation of women's bodies during the partition, where they became a battleground for animosity between communities, the perpetrators, and humanity. Ishar Singh's subsequent importance is an embodied symbol of his own moral and psychological death. His trauma from attempting to violate a corpse reduces him to a lifeless piece of meat, just like his victim, stripping him of his masculinity and humanity. The chilling effect of violence. The motive also reflects how violence creates a society numb to suffering where humans' life is devalued. The term cold meat represents the loss of life and the callousness that takes hold during times of extreme brutality. The motive of distorted masculinity. The story critiques the fragile and toxic nature of masculinity that fueled the communal violence of the partition. The failure of male power. Ishar's impotence is a direct consequence of his violence, rendering him unable to perform the sexual act and undermining his aggressive hypermasculine identity. This demonstrates that the violent assertion of power ultimately corrupts and destroys perpetrator controlling the other. Mentor uses Ishar's psychological collapse to illustrate the pointlessness of communal hatred. The attempt to exert power over another community, symbolized by the rape of the dead girl, is exposed as hollow and destructive. The motive of violence and its aftermath. Thanda Ghost reveals that the effects of violence are far reaching, corrupting perpetrators, witnesses, and society as a whole. Radiating trauma. Manto shows how violence is not contained to its victims. It radiates outward to infect everyone it touches. The emotional and mental trauma Ishwar and Kulwant experiences paralysis and her anger is a lingering effect of the broader communal conflict. Memory in the body. The trauma of partition is shown to be embodied, leaving both psychological and physiological uh, scars. Ishwar's sexual dysfunction and Kulwan's vengeful rage manifests the lingering violence that will not allow the past to be forgotten. The motive of betrayal and shattered relationships. The story's narrative is framed by the intense and eventually fatal confrontation between Ishar and his mistress Kulwant Kaur. The intimate becomes violent. What begins as a lover's quarrel over suspected infidelity quickly escalates into a lethal act of violence. Once Kulwant learns the real cause of Ishar's detachment, the intimate space of their bedroom becomes a battleground mirroring the sectarian violence outside. The decay of human connections. The betrayal Ishar commits through his participation in the communal slaughter poisons his relationship with Kulwant. Their love and passion are ultimately consumed by the broader social and political upheaval, showing how personal bonds were broken and corrupted by partition. Symbols. In Sadat Hassan Manto's story Thanda Gosht, the main symbol is the cold meat itself, which is a euphemism for the raped and murdered female corpse, representing the brutal dehumanization and violence against women during the partition of India. Other symbols include the unnamed Sikh abductor, symbolizing the perpetrators of violence, and the reader, for whom the story becomes a means to understand and confront the unknowing and gendered violence of the era. कि Thanda Ghost. This is the central theme referring to the dead, violated body of a young woman, dehumanization and violence. The phrase highlights the extreme brutality and the transformation of a human being into an object, a victim of sectarian violence during the partition, rape and sarcasm. The term is used sarcastically by the rapist to describe the body of he has abused, underscoring the horrific reality of the situation. The Sikh abductor he represents the perpetrators of the violence, embodying the senseless hatred and brutality that emerged during the partition. Unknowing and obscenity, his actions are described through the concept of originary queerness and the process of unknowing, a form of denial or willfulness ignorance that allows for the continuation of gendered violence. The reader. Manto implicates the reader in the story's themes, confrontation with reality. The reader is confronted with the harsh reality of the partition, serving as a witness to the unspeakable violence and the silencing of victims. Gender taxonomy. The story, through its shocking depiction, forces readers to grapple with the established gendered assumptions and norms that enable such violence. थैंक यू। आई होप आज की वीडियो आपको पसंद है। कैसी लगी हमें कमेंट करके बताएं, और कोई डाउट्स या सजेशंस है तो वो भी आप कमेंट सेक्शन में ड्रॉप कर सकते हैं। अगर वीडियो अच्छी लगी तो लाइक शेयर एंड सब्सक्राइब टू माय चैनल। मिलते हैं कल एक और इन्फॉर्मेटिव वीडियो के साथ शाम 4 बजे। टिल देन कीप वॉचिंग एंड कीप सपोर्टिंग द सोलफुल डायरी। थैंक यू।